T minus 50 seconds. T minus 40 seconds. T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
It's everyone's friend, it's Tyler. He's your only black friend, so he's your best black friend. I want you to treat him for it as a black friend, because black friends are rare, as you should be aware. He smiles like Richard Pryor, so just sit and stare. It's everyone's friend, it's Tyler. It's everyone's friend, it's Tyler. It's everyone's friend, it's Tyler.
Hey everybody, Tyler here. Today I have a special guest. Her name is Naria. She is from the Holy Humanist channel. So hi Naria, how are you doing?
Hi Prince, I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
I am fantastic. First and foremost, what do you think about the opening?
I think it's so dope. Honestly, Prince, that like just even your theme tune, it's gonna be stuck in my head now. So catchy. You smashed it. Oh my gosh, that is so cool. And also,
by
it's
the
so
way,
different.
guys, if you want to see her, so by the way, guys, if you want to see her channel, go right here, the Holy Humanist, where she basically
Prince,
talks
your
about
voice is echoing. I don't know why, a little bit.
Oh, why now?
Say something?
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Still a little bit of an echo.
What about now?
Yeah, still.
Oh my god. What's happening the microphone right now? Okay, what about right now? Can you hear me?
No, it's crackling with an echo. Oh gosh.
Oh my god. Hold on. Let me try to switch the microphone for 1 second.
Okay, yeah, no worries.
Let me see.
I'm glad you enjoyed your intro.
What about now?
Oh, I think that might be better. Say something again?
What about now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, so anyway, I don't know what happened for like a second there, but I had to switch the microphones to my computer microphone because I was using my external microphone for 1 second there.
Okay, no worries.
But anyway, this is her channel right here. This is the Holy Humanist channel. She talks about ex-Muslim content, and so I recommend everybody to go to her channel. But so today's topic is going to be about free speech, largely because it's really much inspired by what happening in the United Kingdom. And so basically one event that happened more recently was it was like a bunch of students that went to a high school and they basically dropped the Quran, and the whole controversy just centered from there. So I guess you can go first about the details about this particular incident.
Yeah, sure. So basically, this was the incident happened in Yorkshire in a school called Kettlethorpe School, I believe. But yeah, Kettlethorpe High School, yeah. And essentially involved like an autistic child who had bought the Quran to the school after a bet, like from losing a video game or something. And allegedly the week before he had bought a Bible as well. So in that process with him bringing the Quran to school, apparently the cover of the Quran got destroyed and it was a bit scuffed. So I've seen pictures and there was like a little bit of like kind of like what you'd see is like marks from it being on the ground, just on the very end of the page. It wasn't even over the writing per se, but essentially this autistic boy and his friends started getting death threats from other students after this happened. And essentially, the police had to get involved, and the Muslim local community got involved, and the mother of the child, as you can see in the picture, had to attend the mosque. She wore hijab. She met with the local Muslim council there and the police, and she basically apologized for her son's quote unquote like disgusting, silly behavior, even though he is an autistic child. And then I'm not sure again, but as far as we know now, up until now, the children who had been giving death threats to them have not been suspended, or that like hasn't been looked into further. Whereas there was some talk about whether this boy and his friends have got suspended because of what's happened. Some reports said that they have, other reports have said not. Humanist UK have just kind of retracted their initial report because they couldn't confirm the suspension. So we're not sure about that. But essentially, that's what went down. And it caused a whole question, as Prince was saying, about, you know, blasphemy in the UK, free speech and things like that.
Yeah, let's go and watch the video and see, like, you know, what's happening with the murder, because it's also really good to see the footage than just talk about it. So let's see the footage first, and then we can comment about, like, what's happened in the footage.
Down and we research. Firstly, thank you so much for letting me come here today to speak to you. I know that what my son has done is disrespectful. He didn't have any malicious intent, but he's a very, very silly 14-year-old boy who does have some challenges. He does suffer with high functioning autism. It means that socially he doesn't always realise what is appropriate and what's not appropriate. And on this occasion, he has been completely disrespectful. He hasn't understood how sacred your holy book is. He actually, after the incident occurred, he realised he had offended a Muslim boy who was quite a good friend of his. He, off his own back, did send an apology to that boy and said that he realised that he'd been disrespectful. He told me immediately when I got home from work that night what he'd done. I told him he would need to face the consequences because what he had done was incredibly disrespectful. We sat down and we researched about the Quran. We learned obviously that it is a very, very sacred text, that you must wash your hands before you touch the Quran. It must be kept high. You can't just read from the Quran as some of his friends have done. And he realised at that point how massive this was. He is utterly mortified. He's very, very apologetic. He's very remorseful. He hasn't eaten since Wednesday afternoon when this occurred because with his autism, it's put his anxiety to a level where he is beside himself. He's very, very sorry. He was quite happy to come here today and tell you how sorry he was. And he's asked me to say that it's not just me apologising for what he's done. He wants to apologise for what he's done to each and every one of you. We have had to call the police. He has received death threats. He has received threats that he will be beaten up if he goes back to school. He's absolutely petrified. But I don't want anybody to be prosecuted because of the stupidity of my son and his friends.
I just want to comment right here. That is, I find it interesting that the woman, the mother of the child, is saying that she's not going to use persecution against like the death threats, because if I remember correctly, according to the details of the story, because of course, like, you know, the Quran was scrubbed, that's why the police were involved in the first place. And so it seems as though that the police right here are taking priority about the Quran versus the safety of the woman, or misinterpreting this.
No, you've got it 100% correct, Prince. The police were like complicit in saying to the local Muslim council or community there that we're going to investigate as soon as they got involved, because like this should be purely and only a school matter that should be like resolved within the school itself. That's not, it's got no affiliation with the religious Muslim community, but them airing their grievances. I mean, there were allegations in the beginning that the Quran had been burnt, and then they had to clarify and say, no, it hadn't been burnt. But when they got involved, that's when the police really kind of stepped up and said, we will like you look into this and investigate. And then just the location of where this was done, the fact that the mother had to go to a mosque and the police again were complicit in that and did not say or did not arrange a more neutral venue. So the mother's already conceded. She's wearing hijab, she's apologizing, she's talking about where the Quran should be placed in a house and the rituals of what you need to do before you kind of read the Quran or touch the Quran. I mean, that's not something that she's expected to know, let alone her autistic child, you know?
Mm-hmm. There's also like another video I want to show, because this one is also, I guess you can say, in relationship to the mother, because there was also statements coming directly from other people. So here we go. It's like from the high school teacher. It's going to be right here. And we can just also play the audio from this.
Oh, Prince, we can't hear the audio, Prince.
I'm sorry?
Oh, we couldn't hear the audio if you were playing it.
Okay, hold on. Let me try to reset the audio.
Okay, cool.
What about now?
Hit play? No.
Oh, okay, so I see what I did right there. So when I clicked share screen, I forgot to say share the audio. Okay.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Oh my god, like today is like full of technical errors. I'm sorry, guys.
That's
It's been
okay.
like
It's a lazy Sunday. It happens.
okay. It's
Oh, now it's stuck. Well,
now it's
Satan.
stuck.
Oh, it's playing. Oh,
Okay, it's playing now.
no. Maybe just give it a refresh.
Hard to put the picture together. There's been a lot of young people involved, as has already been said, in terms of being interviewed and spoken to, and that will continue. As a school, we stand up for everybody working together as a community, centred around respect and kindness, and that's a very important agenda for every one of us. I've been proud to be head teacher at Thorpe High School for 16 years, and before that I was a deputy head teacher and a classroom teacher since 1993. Today, as I said, has been a challenge, and I have to say that I feel that we've worked very hard as a community with everybody getting involved to make sure, one, that we understand what's gone on, because that's very, very important, and two, to make sure that people are kept safe and secure and that things do not escalate and become more challenging and difficult. Today, we have got an understanding as to what's gone on. We've listened very carefully to the questions that were being asked, and we will continue to work as a community with your colleagues from the mosque and the wider community to fully establish what has gone on in terms of the questions that need to be answered, and also to look at how we can, as a community and wider community, further support young people with understanding how different faiths and different religions and different people from different backgrounds can work together and be part of a cohesive and collective community where everybody is valued. As I said, a very sad day. We understand exactly the sensitivity and the fragility and the concern that has been expressed by the Muslim community in particular, and we are wanting our pupils to understand and learn from that. We don't wish to see young people escalating the matter and taking the law into their own hands. That's very dangerous for everybody concerned. We want to make sure that if anybody's got any concerns, they talk to adults, they talk to parents, and we share that information and that intelligence so that we can make sure that we do what we need to do together in the correct way, where everybody has a wider understanding of what is acceptable and not acceptable. As I said, a very, very sad day.
Yeah, I think I got the idea from the video what exactly is happening. I think pretty sure like everybody else watching also probably have a good idea from the clip. But I think you're probably more of an expert when it comes down to law because you study law. So when it comes down to, I guess, like, property, like, would you say, like, according to British law, that if a student were to destroy the property of the school, that would be illegal, correct?
Yeah, the property of a school, yes.
What if a student were to destroy their own property, like a book, would it be illegal then?
No.
Right, because in the story, from what I gathered, because according to what I read, is that it was his own personal copy of the Quran. And so, in that sort of scenario, would it be, I guess, illegal for a student to desecrate his own book?
No, and also the fact that I mean, somebody in the comments said it very well. Like Death Star has said, sad because obviously the head teacher was saying it's a sad day. He repeated that twice, but sad day, lol, a book was dropped. And as you're saying, like from our understanding, what we gauged, it's his own personal possession. But you also have to remember this child is not just also like a child that you would consider to think almost always rationally and reasonably according to like a reasonable human being of their age because of the autism. I don't know where on the spectrum he is, but that already allows for so much more leeway in terms of understanding his actions. And as the school even came to the conclusion that there was no malintent, once there's no malintent established, there's not really anything left to say that. But the police still noted this down as like a hate incident. Obviously it's like not going to be further action, but the fact that, and it's not like considered criminal, but the fact that they still had to note that down, Prince, to kind of pander to the Muslim reaction. The head teacher is saying we need to make more of an understanding between how people's faiths and how to respect them. If anything, he should be standing shoulder to shoulder with that pupil and the mother.
Right. It's like a big, humongous, you can say, debate about like, what is exactly free speech and what exactly would be like the limitations when it comes down to free speech. Because like, in my country, we have, of course, the First Amendment, which basically guarantees a person's right to say whatever. And more recently, there was also like the Supreme Court case where they also stated that hate speech is also free speech. Whereas the situation in Britain's a bit different, whereas they actually do in fact have laws against hate speech, but at the same time they remove blasphemy law, I think more recently in the early 2000s. And so would you say, like, what would you consider to be hate speech? Because I would say that's like a good starting point for why, people would say like, this is not acceptable or whatever.
Yeah, I'd say I guess like in the context here,
Hmm.
we've got like the Equality Act, and the Equality Act ensures that everybody is like protected under, certain characteristics are protected. They're called protected characteristics, which are like, your race, your gender, your age, your ethnicity, disabilities, and your religion. So basically, the way I think about hate speech is that there's any kind of speech that targets any one of those protected characteristics. But again, when we say religion in that, it's like it's not, the UK does not have anything that would bar you from attacking the ideology that is the religion, because through like common law here, we have the right to free speech. So you've got hate speech operating, and then you've got free speech operating as well under common law. But what they're trying to do, like in the case of this Yorkshire incident, is they're trying to conflate the two, and they're trying to say that like hate speech does not go further enough and far enough to protect our right to like not have Allah and not have Muhammad insulted.
Yeah, this is not the first time I've seen something like this happening over there, because there's like a lot of different instances I could probably think of right now where I guess you can say hard conversation about what is free speech and what is not free speech tend to happen in, I guess, in this sort of discourse. Like, even as early, I guess, during the 1980s, earlier, before like this space, we were talking about movies and how I like the sci-fi movies, all that kind of stuff. Because during that time period, there was like a bunch of like, different types of horror movies that were like, really gory, stuff like Evil Dead or like, Cannibal Holocaust. And I remember reading at some point for the case of United Kingdom that they basically would consider such movies with extreme gore as video nasties. And so basically they would have a list of, I guess you can say, inappropriate titles. And they would also demand the distributors to also, you can say, cut certain parts of movies because it was too extreme by the rating board's, I guess, sensibilities. Or I guess more recently, I guess there's this one person I've heard about from Scotland, and I think his name is Count Dankula, where he posted a video of, I guess you can say, of a Nazi pug, and he was like, making fun of all the, I guess, that kind of stuff. And because he posted that video, he was actually arrested because they deemed the video to be too offensive. And so, would you say that something like free speech is a constant, like you can say, struggle over there?
Yeah, oh yeah, 100%. I haven't heard of this exact example from Scotland, but I'll definitely look into that one. But I would say it is a constant struggle in the sense that, like, the law in terms of like judicial reviews for already like verdicts that have come out which are meant to set precedents, they are being challenged. So the concept of free speech and hate speech, and like, just identity politics is always being kind of in this like tug of war situation. So it's a really complex area. I mean, even I don't feel 100% comfortable always trying to define it, or like in a way that would match up to what a secular progressive nation should be, whereas you're also still protecting people enough. So I mean, the best we've come to, I think, so far is an incitement to violence. Once you cross the line where your speech is inciting violence, that's like a kind of good benchmark for that's where it needs to become criminalized. But again, I think religious people and religious communities try and push that threshold a lot further like down and say that, oh, but according to our beliefs, you should not be doing that. Therefore, you need to criminalize something based on our beliefs. And that's just not how it works. Like, it's just, you've got enough protection under the current scope of the law at the moment. And that should be enough. The rest is beyond that. It's your feelings and your sentiments that are being hurt.
Right. Earlier we were just talking about, I guess, the issue of hate speech, because even, I guess, maybe from a much more American point of view, the term hate speech come across as very, you can say, nebulous, because ultimately, I guess, how people perceive hate is seen to be a very kind of subjective thing, because what is hateful towards me is not hateful towards you, and vice versa for everybody else. And so, like, for your case, when you criticize Islam, because you were experienced of an ex-Muslim, I don't really see, like, for example, you criticizing Islam as a form of hate speech. Meanwhile, if like a Muslim would like to watch your video and see how you criticized their ideas, they will consider it to be hate speech. So it's like, I would say, like, that's kind of what's the main concern for me. It's like, the term hate speech could be meaning basically anything, I guess, for anybody defining what it is.
Yeah, 100%, like you said, right? It's so subjective. But, and again, that's where I think that it's important for like activists like yourself and myself, from the very first like video, I think, just explaining that, hey, look, critiquing an ideology is not the same as critiquing its followers. And I feel like, oh, I have to say that ad nauseum, especially when it comes to like certain groups of people. But that's where I do think like it is at that point, it's your emotions and your defenses and your defense mechanism kicking in, because everything you've been told about, for example, Muhammad being the most perfect human being, I am coming here and completely like throwing that out of the water and presenting such a negative image. Naturally, your defense mechanisms would kick in, but that doesn't take away from whether what I'm saying is true or not, or factual according to their own history. So that bit is emotional. And in that sense, that's where my freedom of speech kicks in, and not your hate speech, because we've not met the threshold of violence being, in fact, your religion meets the threshold of hate speech. The Quran meets the threshold of hate speech, if anything.
Right. There was also a similar story that happened prior to this one because it was another story. I think it was about a teacher. He was
Oh,
doing some sort of class about blasphemy.
free speech, actually.
Free speech?
Yeah, yeah, he was doing a class about free speech in an open society. How ironic.
Yeah, so basically he was doing a class about free speech, and I think in the details that I read that he told the students in advance that you will might see some offensive images before they showcase, I think, what was it, a drawing of Muhammad, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, it was Muhammad on a mug.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Muhammad on the mug. And because even though he told the students in advance that he was going to do this, they still basically they made the whole guy just go into hiding because they were too offended by the image of the mug.
Yeah, I mean, Prince, because I keep checking up on his story like every few months, just to see, if like the UK has corrected itself or if they've learned something from that. But the last I checked, it turns out that he's still in hiding. He's been moved to like one of the furthest corners of the country and he's been given a new identity. And it's affected him and his family so much to the point where they said that or like because his life was under threat, like you can imagine how much that it would have affected his own mental health, leaving everything you ever known, given like witness protection in a country where you would think that you have the right to do this. Like you are giving in to the police. Everyone is complicit in giving in to the intimidation. That's why I'm really actually grateful that, not that I like her in most departments, but Suella Braverman actually came out and took a harsh stance in the UK and said that we don't have blasphemy laws in the UK, and that's the first pushback I've seen in a long time. So I'm glad that there was some rhetoric from the government in that, like, this is not gonna fly in this country and we can't allow people to get away with it. I think that sends the right message, and I feel like in the UK we've been way too slow with giving that message.
Yeah, that's the same thing with the case of like I think it was a French teacher. I forgot his exact name. I think it's Samuel Paté or whatever.
Samuel Paty, yeah.
So he did something similar in the class, and then the Muslim student basically told the parents. And then there was some sort of video I think I saw where he was like some sort of, I guess, guy just telling everybody what happened who was a Muslim. And then of course, as soon as he left, I believe he was actually killed because of the tattletelling of, like, I guess, from this Muslim student. And he did the exact same thing like this guy did for the UK. He basically told everybody, hey, this is going to happen. And of course, be prepared for this happen. And basically, he died because of that. And fortunately, I guess for the case of France, I think what they did after his death was put like an image of like I think it was a Charlie Hebdo image on top. I think I'm not sure if it was like the Eiffel Tower or whatever, but some sort of place. They put the image after, I guess, they heard the news about that.
Yeah, I think they basically put like Charlie Hebdo cartoons all over some of the central buildings in Paris. Again, just to show a sign that, hey, like, if you're going to start beheading teachers in broad daylight for teaching something as trivial as, freedom of speech or Islam or showing cartoons, then we're gonna push back, because once you give them an inch, Prince, they will take a mile. You have to kind of, at some level, it is like a state of war with their ideology, because it is just laying low until you get enough power. But the infiltration in the school, like, it's not even in England, it's not just with when a teacher messes up and they show Muhammad like in cartoon form or something, even after, as you said, I didn't even know that. I didn't know that they had even pre-warned the children that you're going to be seeing this, so be prepared. That's wild, if they've even had to get like consent forms signed or anything. But I mean, the fact that if you're that offended, keep your child at home that day from school.
It's the same thing that happened over here, because I think it was some sort of university teacher who was teaching about art. And he said specifically in the syllabus that you're going to show, like, these sort of images of religious figures, including Muhammad. And of course, as soon as the students particularly the Muslim students, saw the image of Muhammad in that art class at that university, they also, I think, fired the teacher because there were too many complaints from the Muslim students. It's happened more recently in the States.
Oh my God. See, this is becoming an issue everywhere because even in Canada, we saw that school who had wanted to host that Yazidi ISIS survivor.
Yeah.
I forget her name now. I think it's Nadia something. But they pulled out last minute amid fears of Islamophobia being generated. I mean, since when a Yazidi girl who has escaped ISIS and lived in their presence as a sex slave, telling her truth and speaking her truth and alerting the world to the human rights violations that are taking place against the Yazidis, the literal genocide of them. Oh, Nadia Murad, thank you, Hadrian. Yeah, that's her name. So same thing happening in Canada, but Prince, as I was saying, like even in the UK, it's not just when something happens. Like even, for example, the national curriculum that is being taught, when they are now naturally enabling more just awareness about the LGBTQIA community, there's protests outside to just to change the syllabus. The syllabus matches with Islamic doctrine and doesn't teach anything that goes against Islamic doctrine. And again, that kind of pressure the schools succumb to. So they're not just out there waiting for someone to display a Muhammad cartoon. They've got problems with everything. So you're in a secular...
Well, another example of this would be like, I think it was a movie that was produced by, it was like Shia Muslims. And I forgot the title of the movie though, but it came out, I think, last year. And there were like a lot of...
Lady of Heaven?
What was it called?
Lady of Heaven?
Yes, that one. Lady of Heaven. There was like a lot of pressure, I guess, for British movie theaters to not show the movies, and there was like a lot of protests too, because many, I guess, Sunni Muslims were offended by the movie.
It was actually the Shia Muslims.
Shia Muslims?
No. Yeah, it was because basically the four rightly guided caliphs in Islam,
Yes.
after the Prophet, that's who the Sunnis believe in, right? Whereas the Shias kind of break off at that point. So this showed like Umar and Abu Bakr to like as very nasty characters, which, as you said, like would be quite offensive to the Shias. And also it shows that Muhammad's like child bride, Aisha, also like had a hand in his death, like in exacerbating the poison that he had taken in Khaybar when that Jewish lady poisoned him. So that, I mean, again, they protested even like in local cinemas and up north as well. But again, based on their peaceful quote unquote protests, the cinemas actually pulled the movie from the screens. So there were very limited cinemas that were actually showing that, and like within a few weeks there were very few viewings left. And again, I went to watch it and it was just full of Shia Muslims who were like revering it so much. Prince, I'm saying, like they were in literal tears, like sobbing, wailing next to me. It was like, yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, the thing about the protests, it's like, okay, there's one set of Muslims that obviously don't like it, but then there's like another set that likes it. So it's like, how do you deal with this sort of situation where one sex likes it, but the other sex don't? It's just like,
I guess that they're just like, oh, whoever we're more intimidated by.
Yeah, it's the thing. It's the same thing. Like, I think when the movie The Life of Brian came out, there was like a humongous controversy back then too. I think it was like the 1970s, where I would believe that certain countries may have banned or maybe have censored the movie because I guess they deem it to be too offensive. I think there was also, I think, some sort of debate where I saw the members of Monty Python, I guess, debating like, the clergy of the church about the particular issue about The Life of Brian. But I guess like that movie has gotten so integrated into our culture where people don't think like twice about that movie. Even Christians like The Life of Brian. Do you think you need to have some sort of Life of Muhammad someday?
Oh my
Maybe
gosh.
someday.
Oh, 100%. Like I always say, like, you know, like wherever this movement is going, we'll know that like it's really gotten somewhere to a point where everything is hunky dory when there is a movie like Life of Brian out for Muhammad. Was that the way that movie absolutely takes the piss out of the whole story. Or like we come from a society where like obviously Shia Muslims have this, which they really like Lady of Heaven, for example, which completely suits their narrative. As a Sunni Muslim growing up, the movie that I had that was the closest representation to the Islamic story was The Message, a movie. It's got Anthony Quinn. I think it's a 1950s movie, but in that, like Muhammad is so revered that he's not even like he's not even a character, a real person. There's just like this really slow, dramatic music that plays whenever he's supposed to have said something, and then you only hear what he's spoken from the other characters' monologue or conversation afterwards. So if we're at that point and we're stuck in that for so long, when we can get to a point of Monty Python type movies for Islam, that's when we've done something, Prince.
Yeah, I think, if someone has the guts to do that and not get beheaded and, don't have to worry about the security and everything else, that would be fantastic. But unfortunately, it's like the opposite because last year it was like the author, oh my God, I forgot the guy's name just right now. Damn. It was this author, he made like the satanic verse. What's his name? Saudi Rushdie, right?
Yeah.
Saudi Rushdie. So, because I remember reading the news station the other day where basically he was giving some sort of speech talking about he was really appreciative, like, going to the States where free speech is still here. And the moment he started doing that speech, it was reported they were stabbed multiple times because they found the book to be offensive. And even prior to that whole entire controversy, like I believe it was like, some editors also had to go into hiding because it was too offensive, or that some translators were also killed because of that book. And of course, the whole issue of them trying to hide from danger because they found the book to be super offensive. But in reality, if I remember correctly, the whole issue about the satanic verses is actually based upon a true historical event that Muhammad had done when he was like, asking people to write down the words from the Quran.
Yeah, 100%. He's just fictionalized a story that actually appears in Islamic history according to Islamic sources themselves. I think I've done a video on it called "The Real Satanic Verses" or something like that. But it does relate to the Gharanik incident in the history of Islam, where Muhammad accidentally says that you can ask the daughters of Allah, Allat, Al-Manat, and Al-Uzza, three of them, for intercession. So he was basically appealing to the needs and wants of the polytheists, like his former religion, the pagan religion. And then later, when he gets called out for it, he's like, "Oh no, that was Satan. He put those words on my tongue." And then Allah soon removed them, and he corrected the falsehood from the truth and gave you truth. So that's embarrassing anyway, because that shows up in the Quran itself. But he's fictionalized that. Yes, he's used names and incidents which are remarkably similar, but again, he produced that by being in the UK, in a country where you're allowed to put out fictional books, no matter how closely they resemble reality. But since 30 years ago, when that whole fiasco happened in the UK, it's when you really saw a turning point of Islamism grow in the UK, because they were actually fuming to the point where people were calling for the book to be burned and called back, and his life was under threat. And then there was a documentary done 30 years later, Prince, because obviously I wasn't around when that incident happened, but I've kind of grown up and come into a cultural landscape where this is all part and parcel of what's happening around me. So now 30 years on, they did a documentary, and those same sentiments were shown by people around the UK who nothing has changed in all of those years. If anything, it's got worse. So much so that we've seen that even when Salman Rushdie was giving a talk somewhere in America at some retreat type thing, he was attacked. So
Oh, now you call her princess now.
Oh wow,
Call her
princess.
princess, you're the princess. Okay.
I'll take that. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
it's like, really crazy too, because I also remember reading at some point during the controversy that besides, of course, the whole issue about the translators or people going to hiding or getting killed over that book, was that also they basically just destroyed like a lot of buildings too. They were like really, really upset, and of course the fatwa against the authors. Crazy. But like the thing about it though is that many people they see criticizing a religion, I guess like Islam for this case, is the same thing as being a racist. And I don't necessarily see how the two can possibly connect because most dictionary definitions that we know it has of course racism as defined as prejudice against somebody based upon their characteristic, based upon their race rate. Whereas, of course, if you criticize the ideas of, I guess, like, religion like Islam, it would be the complete opposite of, like, being racist. And so, like, why would you? I'm kind of curious, like, do you think that, of course, like, obviously the whole issue about Islamophobia is like a whole entire debate about that word, too. But what do you think about that word specifically? Because obviously, criticizing a religion is not being racist. But at the same time, people insist on use the word Islamophobia. What do you think about that?
yeah, I think again, it's like a last kind of resort from Muslims to try and conflate or find some protection in the law for themselves to like, make them some specific category of protection under the banner of Islamophobia, where, as you said, like when people try and conflate Islam with a race, you 100% can't do that because Islam itself has come out of, let's say, regardless of all of the different theories out there, the Arabian Peninsula, right? And then I would go as far as to say like it has like a supremacy element to it, where Qurayshi Arabs are preferred, but then Arabs in general, and then like Black Muslims are just considered, less Muslims anyway. South Asian Muslims are considered converted Muslims as well. So it's kind of, there's so much going on there. But there's Indonesian Muslims, there's Malaysian Muslims, there's Muslims from all over the world, and the only thing they have in common is Islam, not their race, not their ethnicity, not their, lineage, nothing. So I just think it's trying to muddle the waters and trying to stop you from giving the ideology of Islam any real criticism by hiding by something so sensitive like racism, which they know that nobody today wants to be called a racist, right? So they've made Islamophobia as like dirty of a word that people have gotten so scared for calling out Islam that they'll just be labeled bigoted or racist or Islamophobic, and that those are like words that would get you cancelled nowadays.
Yeah, it's just so weird to me because, I don't want to generalize, political sides because obviously for my case, I'm not part of any political party. Like I see some like, issues on both sides, no matter where it comes from.
Yeah.
But it seems still, at least in my perspective, that I guess those who tend to consider themselves to be left wing have a bigger problem trying to criticize the ideas versus somebody that's on the right. And it's like, how can we possibly, I guess, encourage like, people on the left to, criticize the ideas without saying, you know what, this is actually, racist for criticizing the idea. Like, I guess, for my case, like, I try to, critique the ideas no matter the side. And I guess that's my way to try to normalize. So it's actually okay to, be whatever kind of political side and, criticize the ideas. Like, what would it take for society to, I guess, go past that point? That's a hard question.
Yeah, no, that's a really hard question, especially like the more polarized, both sides are getting, and the more like identity politics are at play, and the more that Islamophobia is used as a successful trope, it's getting harder and harder to push back, especially with the way that like the left is kind of in bed with, narratives like you were saying, like talking against Islam is racism, and then activists, I guess, or people who speak about these things are kind of politically homeless anyway, because you don't want to be so far on the right that you're considered almost like bigoted and actually racist, and then you also don't want to be on the left. But I would say like there's going to come a point. I try not to kind of push either side to understand. I'm just kind of on the straight and narrow doing our own thing, I think. But I think the left are going to have like a harsh wake up call anyway themselves when this, like, I think Horace Sultan calls it an unholy alliance, which I really like that term for this, because the second that Islamist or Islam actually comes into power, or these people start getting into positions of government and then not pushing, let's say, progressive LGBTQ plus policies or things like that, that's when they're going to realize, oh shit, who were we backing this entire time? So I'm kind of waiting for that to all come to a head. And in the meantime, just call out both sides for, you know, what they're lacking to address.
All right, we have a comment directed towards you. So the comment says right here, I'm from Malaysia originally. I'm not, let's see, I know exactly what Naria talks about, only care for Muslims, not us Indians and Chinese. Very sad, actually, that we're treated as second-class citizens.
Oh yes, Desperado Kumar. Not I mean, again, I agree with that 100%. I actually lived in Malaysia myself, and it wasn't even just. I mean, the nice thing is it's pluralistic in the sense that you get holidays for everything. So you'll get Chinese New Year, you'll get Diwali, then you'll get Eid, which is Hari Raya, I think, in Malaysia. But there's so many holidays because there's so much to celebrate. But then you actually have positive discrimination against like the Orang Asli, like the native population of Malaysia. They're actually enticing them with jobs and like houses and like a subsidized future if they convert to Islam. So slowly but surely the Malaysian government are trying to weed out the indigenous culture of Malaysia as well. So I think that's really awful on their part, and people need to talk about that a lot more and push back. Again, because they're trying to homogenize Malaysia to be, you know, as Islamic and Muslim as possible. And I think, again, it's just pure colonization of the people who were first there. These are the indigenous people of Malaysia.
Yeah, the thing about it, though, is like, you know, and I guess you were talking earlier about how basically there are different populations of people of different backgrounds that are Muslims, but not many people really just think about why exactly their Pacific country is majority Muslim. Like we were talking earlier, I think in your other live stream about how basically Muslims force themselves to like Africa and of course try to convert people that way. But also, I don't think not enough people know about, I guess, you know, the forced conversions of like, you know, people to become Muslims. And of course, not just in Arabia, but also in Malaysia and also in India, where they also start to, you know, conquer people. And it's like the same thing with like, you know, the case of Europe, where they also colonize like most of Spain before they start fighting back through the Crusades. I guess maybe when you're so entrenched into that culture, that many people don't really think twice about why exactly they're this particular religious demographic. And I guess, you know, for questioning something like Islam, it could be really scary, I guess, you know, with your surroundings and the culture around you.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, you know, what's happening in Iran right now is kind of shows you what happens when generations and generations of a really, really rich ancient culture is like absolutely done with the colonizing like Arab culture that was enforced on them. So this, I feel like what's happening in Iran is just like it's a tug of war from a very, very long time ago, because they're a very proud people with a very proud ancient culture themselves. But then you've got countries like, I'd say other countries that have gone so entrenched in Islam, as you say, that any challenge to Islam or Sharia or the way of life there is not like them getting independence of any kind or breaking the shackles of Islam. That would actually be like an attack on their culture, because it's just seeped into their culture so much. And again, like you see variations. So like a Muslim practicing Islam in Egypt, again, where Islam was taken there by the sword, but a Muslim practicing Islam in Egypt would be very, very different from a Malaysian Muslim practicing Islam in Malaysia. The way they celebrate Eid would be hella different. The way they do everything would be different, because at some level it's like integrated with their culture. But there's most countries around the world consider that their culture now. So like even if you go back to Morocco and you look at the Berbers and things like that, there's so many Berbers who are like, no, we have these traditions and this is the way we do it. But you have to go into the mountains to find those people who are separating themselves from Islam, whereas the rest of Morocco is so proud of their Islamic heritage, you know?
Yeah, it's also interesting because also earlier in the conversation, you mentioned how, of course, basically the police were involved in this incident. Of course, the family got pressure and the mom had to veil. I'm not sure, like, that's actually the correct response. Like, I don't understand. I mean, of course, I understand that you're afraid of, like, the safety of your child. Of course, any parent should be afraid about their safety, about something like this happening. But at the same time, I don't understand, like, what's the purpose to put on the veil? I guess maybe to just show some type of respect. But I guess the way I kind of interpret it is like if you give them an inch, you get a mile. And so when you put on like a veil, I guess in front of like, Muslims and, say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I would think, I mean, it's one thing to say I'm sorry in front of them, but like another thing to just put on a veil. That's a bit too extra to me.
I know. I mean, I thought the same thing. I was like, oh my gosh, I had to do a double take. I was like, is she covering her head? Um, but I think you're right. Like again, it comes from a place of respect. I mean, I've seen women in England do that all the time when they go to a mosque. It's almost instinctive. Like they know that that's just something they have to do. They're so fearful of being racist or not sensitive enough or not understanding enough of the other. Is all about like the way that the like a lot of Muslims here have propped up this like victim blaming culture, about how much hate crime is done against us and nobody understands us and our reasons for doing things. So a lot of non-Muslim people go out of their way to accommodate them. And I think, again, she was coming from a place of already conceding and saying what my son did was really silly. Even though he's a 14-year-old boy, 14-year-old boys are hella naughty. Like, who isn't at that age? And then he's also autistic, so he doesn't even understand the severity, quote unquote, of his actions.
Yeah, would you say, like, I guess prior to this incident, like, were there any cases of people being outraged for, like, I guess, desecrating the Bible, for example?
Not to my knowledge, not here. No, in the UK, we're very easy with taking the mick out of Christianity and Jesus and that kind of thing. We've really got used comfortable with that.
It's like, yeah, if it's just like no, it's like so strange. So basically, like, again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing that, of course, people can take the mickey out of like Christianity and do whatever they want to the Bible, because I think that ultimately, if they want to do whatever they want with their property, they have that right. And so, if somebody wants to, illustrate in their Bible, use a marker, or desecrate it, or I guess put it in flames, we'll do whatever. I don't necessarily care that much. But it's like, I guess it's like, the sort of, question of attitudes and a simulation, I guess you can say. Because obviously, when you have people, I guess you can say, coming from neighboring countries and they have the same sort of values, it's kind of easier for people to just integrate into that society. And so I'm kind of curious, like, what do you think that I guess maybe some Muslims, not all, but I guess some Muslims have a hard time integrating into British societies for something like this? Is it because I guess maybe the lack of like, culture exposure, or they raised a certain way? Like, what do you think that's the case right now?
Are you talking about immigrants who come here, like
Yeah,
when they're older? Okay.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think a lot of them, yeah, again, it's the countries that they come from. They're very, very conservative countries usually, especially if they're Muslim Islamic countries. The separation of the sexes is quite normal, or like you don't really see that many women in public spaces and spheres that often. But also in England, we have a massive problem of kind of birds of a feather flock together. So there's like a ghettoization of certain areas which have effectively become no-go zones, where some of them have like parallel Sharia court systems where you can go and approach a Sharia council before English law if you wanted to. So again, it's more just like You're surrounded by a little community that has all halal shops. You go to your local mosque, you're surrounded by those same people. There's not a pub near you in sight. You don't really mix with other people, other nationalities. You very much keep yourselves to yourselves, and it's no different from you kind of being in your home country or not that far away from it. And I just don't think we've managed to kind of assimilate across the entirety of our country in a way that's healthy. And I think that's like a massive part of the problem here.
So here's my friend Ernest right here. Ernest is actually part of the Church of England, actually, but he lives in Canada.
Oh.
He says right here, as a theology student, I can say that the number of people who highlight or mark their Bible is higher than you think. Okay. And this comment from Death Star also says they've been here for 100 years. I'm not sure how true is that. I can't fact check it.
Yeah, but like Death Star is also saying like marry your cousins, etc. That's kind of the thing that they also bring with them from like especially British Pakistanis from back home. Like it's very normal. And now we have like a health crisis in the UK where even like our National Health Service is saying, hey, this disproportionately happens only amongst the Pakistani community, and it's causing like serious health concerns, and children are being born with such horrible defects. And again, because they're in these communities, it's happening, whether it's forced marriages, arranged marriages, or whatever, it's happening, and they just haven't integrated to such an extent. But also, Prince, just on that, like there's also like a large British Pakistani portion of the society here have strong links to some of the leading Islamic parties back in Pakistan, and they are very, very pro blasphemy laws and kind of, you know, nobody defames or talks badly about the prophet. And so those people have been kind of deployed here to run mosques and communities, and so they come with that hardline approach, which is why we saw the Muslim community in Yorkshire like get so quickly involved in what would ordinarily be just a school matter. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, getting back to your comment about the cousin marriages, because I know that there's actually a passage that does in fact sanction the idea of like the cousin marriages. And if I remember correctly in the data, like I think to a certain extent, like large populations, I can't remember the exact countries right now, but large populations, I think maybe like in Pakistan or whatever, have these sort of cousin marriages, which of course contributes to all these sort of issues that people have much later on. It's just there's like a lot of stuff going on that's wrong with Islam right now.
Yeah, there's so much stuff, honestly.
So much
So, Prince, I wanted to actually ask you, Prince, you know, for example, like because of everything we talked about in terms of blasphemy in the UK, but like the pushback against, as in basically like the reactions of Muslims when it comes to like, let's say even just like a mug that had Muhammad's picture on it, yeah? Do you think that not just because Christianity is like kind of just, you know, a background religion now that some people can care for and some people don't, but it doesn't matter. But do you think because that is there anything, or because there is nothing in the Christian scripture per se that says, you know, you may not like depict Jesus, or you may not like draw anything, or you may not try and mock God's creation? Because in Islam, like drawing or like photography in a way, or like capturing a human image or trying to recreate God's image is all forbidden. And then if you put that on to God's last messenger, i.e. God himself, according to what me and you know, it becomes like, that's why I can understand Muslims like raging emotions. But do you think that's why people don't worry too much about Jesus?
The thing about it, though, like, there's nothing in the Bible that I remember anyway that specifically says that if you draw a cartoon, you must kill that person. There's no such thing. Not even in the Old Testament or even in the New Testament, there is no such thing. But one of the commandments that they prescribed to Moses during the, like, you know, for the book of Exodus. So basically what happened was, of course, like Moses basically had to free the slaves. And of course, God gives him a whole set of 10 commandments. And one of the commandments is thou shalt not make graven images. So technically speaking, it's not allowed for people to make graven images, but people don't really follows through that anyway. But and also when it comes down to the New Testament, there are, I guess you can say, passages right there where Jesus Christ said himself that if somebody is not necessarily interested in hearing the word, you just walk away. And so basically, of course, he encouraged people who, of course, if they're not interested in the faith, they can just walk away and, of course, they don't do their own stuff. And so there's
Mm.
no such thing, to my knowledge, anyway, right now, that mandates believers or Christianity to just kill somebody just because they drew a cartoon. Nothing like that.
Okay. No, 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 that's good. That makes sense. And also the graven image thing, yeah, that's so true. I remember, I actually think that's kind of where Islam maybe had picked that up from as well, because Muhammad was like so like, oh God, no. But no, that makes sense actually, and because nobody takes that seriously. But then it is almost like how the Muslims say, like, there's no compulsion in religion. That's what the Quran says. But that is kind of literally what like that this message is what people genuinely take for real. Whereas half the nice Muslims say that there's no compulsion, but the rest say he or she changes their religion, kill them. You know, so
All right, this is coming from Ernest. Okay, it
yeah.
is discouraged, but the punishment comes from God. We call it not in Scripture, New Testament at least, to violence to those who draw or depict God or Jesus.
Discourage. Yeah, oh, okay, okay. So so anybody that does depict or draw Jesus will just get punished in the next life, kind of thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's divine judgment. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, that's what I thought that what would happen with somebody that draws an image in Islam as well. Like, but the fact that now Muhammad is involved, it becomes literal blasphemy. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, the
Wow.
thing is though, like, for my case, I have not drawn a single image of Jesus. Even when I was a Christian and right now, I never drawn like a single image of Jesus. I have no reason to.
Yeah, I've never drawn Muhammad either, and I mean I have plenty of reasons to, but it's not up on my list.
Yeah, yeah. I think for your case, it would be like, not as safe to draw Muhammad because it's already bad enough, I guess, being ex-Muslim in public. But then if you're ex-Muslim plus draw Muhammad, that's like a whole world, like a whole can of worms right there.
Yeah, and like, but like Prince, we're making so much progress now because when you do search like Muhammad on Google, so many cartoons do come up, and I think it was like AP or I think it's AP. He's actually or was it sorry AP or Apostate Aladdin? One of them has started to do, or both maybe, have started to do animated series where like they are depicting the the Sahaba and like the Muhammad and his companions basically. So again, that's a huge leap forward. We are that one step closer to a Monty Python of Islam one day.
Yeah, I really, really hope so. It's just the whole thing, I guess, maybe to end all of this, I guess, for this space, spend like an hour right now. I can't believe it's like an hour. Oh my God, an hour
I
it is.
know. Time
We can
flies when
both
you're
talk
having
forever,
fun.
you know?
I know, honestly.
Yeah, but I guess maybe like a good note to end this on is probably, of course, free speech is the most important. And honestly, the stuff that you do is like, super brave, obviously. Like every time you go on a debate, I'm like thinking to myself, wait a second, what is Naria doing this time around? And honestly, it's like it takes like a lot of guts to do that because when you do the stuff that you do, I guess, in public and doing these type of debates, you're actually also speaking for the voiceless. And it's like, something that I also try to take into mind when I do the stuff that I do, because
Mhm.
not many people are, I guess you can say, are fortunate to be in our position. There are still many people who are, I guess, like, non-believers who are persecuted in those countries. And I guess, with our privilege that we have in the West and the free speech opportunities that we do, we of course can, be the voice for the voiceless, if that makes any type of sense.
It makes complete sense, Prince. And I think that's kind of what we hope to do. And we do what we do and we speak and, we use our spare time to like actually talk about these issues and investigate them some more. And like, I'm so grateful to you. Thank you again for all the work you do, but also for taking time out to do a stream on this topic because again it's not even it's across the pond from you, but it's just like it's testament to your work and like what you think about this stuff that's happening around the world and why we need to discuss certain matters, even if one or two people hear this and they just start to think differently, then we've done something right. So yeah, I just want to say kudos to everything you do, and thank you
Yeah,
for
like everything you guys do over there also affects me here. And I think it's really important that people are more aware about international news. Everybody always pay attention to my country. We need to pay attention to other countries too. That way they can also have justice too. And I hope that the best for your country. Really, I do.
Thank you, Prince, and you too. There's a lot going on there, but we'll talk about that soon. But all the best to you across the pond as well. We'll keep fighting the good fight, yeah?
Yeah. All right. So please, everybody, check out Naria's channel. I have the link in the description down below. And also check out her debates on Modern Day Debates, where she talks to these sort of Muslim fundamentalists all the time. I'm just kind of curious, like, do you get ever tired from doing these kind of debates?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, like, if Daniel is a different breed entirely to debate, so I'm not sure after him if debates are very conducive to getting anywhere, or like it's more just kind of like a chest pumping type situation. But oh my gosh, yeah, I didn't even plan to get into debates. I kind of just rocked up in there. So I much prefer conversations that are healthier and more Socratic like this. But I'm not gonna lie, like, there is an element of fun to it.
Yeah, and also, guys, for those who don't know, basically also what happened was that he censored her face on the thumbnail for the channel when he was live streaming the debate. And it's like the most like I said before, like on Twitter, it's like the most insulting thing I could possibly think of. Like, why would someone want to censor your face? Like, come on.
Oh my gosh, you can't spread fitna and cause mischief in the land, Prince. That's why. But I forgot to say thank you so much to you for not censoring my face. You've restored my dignity after that debate. So thank you so much. So much respect, Prince. I feel human again.
All right, take care, everybody.